Hey everyone, I hope you're well. This is the story about what if Naruto was master of the forbidden jutsu Jiongu. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. So without any further ado, let's start the what if. Konoha streets. Everyone head to the shelters. Come on, quickly. A jonin shouted as he directed the panicking civilians towards the shelters. The Oto and Suna shinobi have left the stadium and were now out in Konoha. Many buildings were destroyed and rubble filled the streets as explosions went off every now and then. Ibiki was standing on a roof coordinating all of the Konoha shinobi that came to him for orders. The Kyumo shinobi were rushing through the village assisting them when possible. What's the status of the South Gate? Ibiki asked a communicator shinobi. Communicator shinobi were specialized in short long-range communications. They were made up of Raiton users to transmit messages from one position to the next. They carried large radios on their backs to transmit their messages. Unlike the Yamanaka, who needed to remain still while transmitting messages, these shinobi were able to talk while moving. They're holding out, but need backup now, he replied. They say that there's a summoning circle just beyond their firing range, and that the enemy is almost done with whatever they're bringing out. Squad 12, head over there and give them the backup they need. Ibiki ordered. Hi, they jumped away and raced towards the wall, where the smoke began to rise into the air. Report from the stadium. The Uzumaki kid is handling the Ichibi with that new summon of his, another communicator reported. That fire creature we were told about, right? Ibiki asked. He received a nod in confirmation. Incoming report from the market district. Those lizard creatures are assisting us in defeating the invaders, Kyumo shinobi are doing so as well. Tell all of our men that they both are on our side. I don't want to hear the Hokage complain about deliberate friendly fire, Ibiki ordered. Speaking of the Hokage, has there been any progress with taking down the barrier? Negative, he's still trapped in there. Ibiki let out a growl of frustration. We're responding well to the threat, but we still need more support. The Ichibi is being taken care of, and Kyumo's giving us their support, along with those lizard creatures that came from the big one that Uzumaki summoned, Ibiki thought. But now we're starting to spread ourselves thin. The invaders had obviously planned for this to happen, but didn't expect us to receive support. All we can do now is hold out until it's time to launch the counterattack. Marketplace. Katon, mouse hairball. Yujito cried as she released the homing fireballs to rain down on the enemy. Oto and Suna shinobi alike screamed in pain as the flames roasted their skin. You're mine. Asuna shinobi shouted as he swung his katana at Yujito's neck from behind her, only to have it caught by another blade. Raiton, lightning stream. Omoi shouted as he channeled lightning chakra through his blade and into the opponents, who screamed as he was electrocuted. Thanks Omoi, Yujito thanked as she got up. You need to watch your back Yujito, Omoi told her. You're leaving yourself open and that could be fatal, which could lead me to take the blame for your demise and Kyumo losing the Nibi. And what if Raikage-sama decides to punish me for my failing to protect you? He might use his iron claw and… Oh Omoi! Yujito yelled, breaking the genin from his rambling. You're overthinking this again. Hey guys! Karui yelled as she clashed with an Oto shinobi. You wanna help out? Yujito flung some kunai at the enemy, who disengaged Karui to dodge the kunai, only to be run through by Omoi, who snuck up behind him thanks to the distraction. Let's move out to the next area. Yujito told them in a commanding tone. Hi, the other two nodded as the trio leapt away. Residential district. Fight harder brethren. Repel these cowardly invaders. One of the Amaljae, a leader by the white markings on his skin, commanded as the rest of the beastmen fought on. Many of them had large spears or spiked knuckles for close combat, while others had bows and arrows, or large scepters. The ones with scepters were charging up, as one could tell by the fiery aura around them. Faraga! Several of the Amaljae shouted as they flung mighty fireballs at the Suna and Oto shinobi. The fireballs exploded into a mighty inferno that burned the invading shinobi. Excellent, Lord Ifrit will be pleased that the enemies of his summoner are being defeated, the Amalja leader said. Excuse me. The Amalja leader turned around with his scepter raised before he saw Shino and Hinata there. He spied the Konoha emblem on their headbands and lowered his weapon. Are you members of this village? He asked. Yes, your Lord Ifrit told us to assist you in battle, Shino explained. The leader nodded and said, very well, one of our warriors is engaged in battle with an enemy from the desert. Go there and search for Yalaj-ga, he will be the one you seek. Hinata and Shino nodded before they leapt in the direction that the Amalja had pointed out for them. As they raced by, they saw bodies littering the street, both civilian and shinobi. This is horrible, Hinata whispered as she tried to hold in her tears. Don't worry, we'll get through this, Shino reassured her. Hinata nodded and the duo raced forward until they came upon a fight. Another Amalja was facing off against Baki. The Amalja was engaging in a dangerous dance of swordplay against the Tsunajonin. You're good, for a beast, Baki said as he lowered his blade. Your swordsmanship is atrocious, the Amalja growled. I know that you originate from the desert, have the teachings of the mighty paladin sunk so low to this? Baki frowned and sheathed his sword before making several hand seals. I don't know who these paladins were, but there were never any in Sunagakure. The Amalja growled and raised his blade. So the teaching of the Sultan Sworn has fallen to the ravages of time. A true shame, as they were mighty warriors. Have a taste of my blade of wind. Baki shouted as he darted forward with a sword made out of wind in his hands. The beast man raised his sword and blocked the attack. Impossible! Baki yelled. You call this a blade of wind? Pathetic! The Lady of the Vortex would kill you for this pathetic imitation. The Amalja yelled as he shoved Baki back. The beast man then raised up his sword and held his free hand to it as it began to glow red. Now I believe that the proper name for this would be Blade of Fire. The Amalja yelled as he swung his sword and sent out a wave of fire at Baki, blowing him off of THR roof. The warrior sethed his sword and began to walk away. I refuse to be defeated by some overgrown lizard. Baki shouted as he rushed at the beast man with a kunai ready to strike, and the Amalja had no time to respond. Juho, hak Sanja ni sho. Hinata shouted as she raced out of her hiding place and struck the tired Jonin with swift strikes, sending him to the floor unconscious. Are you Yalaj-ga? Shino asked. I am, and who are you? Based upon your headbands, I can see that you are a part of this village, the beastman said. I am Shino Aburame. And I am Hinata Hyuga. Yalaj-ga blinked and said, so you are the ones who are close to my Lord Ifrit's summoner. It is an honor to meet you. The honor should be ours, Shino said. You are, after all, a powerful warrior. The beastman was about to respond when he looked out to the distance. I am afraid that the pleasantries will have to wait. There is an invasion happening around us after all. Hinata nodded in agreement and said, Hi, let's go and save our village. As the trio raced through the city, Shino took the time to speak to Yalaj-ga. I am curious, how many of these primals are there? I have never heard of anything like them before. It is not surprising, Yalaj-ga began, as Lord Ifrit and his brethren were called to this world once, by a man you all know as the Rikudu Sennin. He called forth the primals to assist him in fighting a force known as the Jubi. To answer your first question, there are 12 primals, each with their own set of followers, save for 2. Each one has a unique power that cannot be imitated by any other means, unless they were taught. Who is your leader? Hinata asked. I mean, who is the leader of the primals? I cannot speak who he is, but I can tell you that he is the most powerful of the primals, as he once tore the world asunder, the Amalja explained. But now, he slumbers. Look! Hinata shouted as she pointed ahead. The trio looked and saw that there was a large group of Oto and Suna shinobi charging through the streets. "Let's go," Shino said as he pushed himself to go faster. "Wait!" Yalajga shouted. "That's where the ambush is." "What ambush?" Hinata asked as she and Shino turned around to face the beastman. Suddenly, they heard cries of pain and looked to see that most of the shinobi were impaled by arrows. They looked and saw that there were Amalgae dressed with blue leather as opposed to the normal red that they saw. The Brotherhood of Ash, while they do not worship Lord Ifrit like those of us garbed in red, they will still work alongside us, Yalajga explained. Unlike how the relations of our ancient ancestors were long ago. But this is no time for that, we must fight. The Amalgae roared as he leapt into the fray, with Shino and Hinata following him. Southern District. One of Naruto's Jiongu clones was stealthily moving through the street. Its eyes were constantly searching for a Suna shinobi that had futon as their main affinity, while its twin searched for Raiton among the Oto shinobi in another part of the village. "Quickly! We need to move it." The clone stopped and hid behind a dumpster, peeked around to see that a part of 3 Suna-s Yohobi were regrouping behind building it was near. "You guys remember the plan?" the apparent leader asked. "Right, we plant explosion tags along the entire district and blow it sky high. That'll send these tree huggers into an even bigger panic," another one said. "You remember your part, Yuma?" the leader asked the only female. "Yes, my futon will slice up anyone who gets in our way," she said in a serious tone. The clone's eyes widened as it finally found the target. And just in time too, as it was running on just over 20% of chakra. The clone began to follow the 3 Suna shinobi as discreetly as possible, all while waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The 3 shinobi were quickly moving through the streets while placing explosion tags on several buildings throughout the whole area. "This is too easy," the cocky male shouted. "There's nobody here." "Shut up," the leader hissed. "Are you trying to attract attention to us?" "Hey guys," Yuma whispered. "We're not alone." She then turned around and launched a blast of wind at a pile of rubble, blowing it away. When the dust settled, the 3 Suna shinobi could see the Naruto clone down on one knee. "Just one piece of cake," the cocky one grinned as he rushed forward. "Wait, you idiot," the leader shouted. But cocky shinobi ignored him as he rushed the clone. The clone merely dodged the sloppy taijutsu and jumped back a safe distance, before creating a spear of threads and thrusting it forward. The shinobi side-stepped the attack and thrusted his fist forward at the clone, who just let its head split apart and allow the fist to pass through. "What the hell?" the shinobi shouted as he jumped back. The clone then flung its arms forward, separating them from its body, and grabbed the shinobi by his shoulders before slamming him down on the ground. "Futon, air blade!" Yuma shouted as she blew out a blade of wind that sliced up the threads connecting one of the clone's arms to its body, allowing her partner to break free from the bindings. "What kind of freak is this?" the shinobi shouted. Suddenly, there was a crack of lightning and the trio moved as a lightning bolt struck down where they were. Everyone looked up to see a serpentine figure on top of the building. The figure sprouted wings and leapt off, before landing next to the clone, creating a small dust cloud. When the dust cleared, the figure was revealed to be a crimson dragon with 2 claws that had 5 fingers. It had no hind legs and had an arrowhead tail that lazily swished back and forth. Its head had 2 horns on the top of its head pointing forward, and 2 horns on the bottom of its head, just behind its jaw, also pointing forward. On its back were large dragon wings with 1 thumbs that were folded back. Its mask had light blue markings in the designs of lightning bolts, and was in the shape of a dragon, complete with a movable jaw filled with sharp teeth. The Jiongu clone just glared at him, disappointed that it didn't get its heart first. The dragon just seemed to grin and make a laughing motion. "Who the hell are these freaks?" the cocky shinobi shouted. "It doesn't matter, just kill them," the leader shouted as he and his team raced forward. Lightning surged from the dragon's four horns and it reared its head back before shooting it forward and unleashing a lightning bolt that struck the ground in front of them, sending up a cloud of dust. The remaining Jiongu clone turned its remaining arm into a scythe and prepared for an attack. Sure enough, the cocky shinobi emerged from the dust cloud and raced towards the clone, who swung its scythe at its opponent, who managed to block it with a kunai. The clone then backed away, making the shinobi stumble before he was rammed by the dragon, two of its horns puncturing the flak jacket and causing him to bleed. Futon, de Tapa. Yuma exhaled a great gust of wind that sent the two flying away. Yuma. Take care of those two. I'm going to get some medical attention for this idiot, the leader ordered as he picked up the wounded shinobi and escaped. The dragon made a motion with his head to go after them, but the clone shook its head, saying that the shinobi in front of them was more important. They then shot towards Yuma and began to relentlessly attack her. She was having a hard time fending off the scythe and claws as they were attacking non-stop. The lightning dragon then leapt back and shot off another bolt of lightning that forced Yuma to separate from the clone. The clone launched itself after her and swung its scythe arm at the kunoichi. Futon, wind burst. Yuma blew out a burst of air that sent her further back away from the clone. She landed on the floor, but let out a surprised gasp as the lightning dragon was upon her once more, unleashing a lightning blast. Yuma could only brace herself as she was slammed with hundreds of volts of electricity. She then let out another gasp, only this time it was of pain. She weakly looked down to see that the clone had stuck its scythe into her before violently ripping it out of her, taking her heart and spreading her life fluid across the street. The clone was staring at the beating heart that was contained within the scythe, already feeling the chakra replenishing it. The clone gave off a feral grin as it burst apart into a mass of squirming red tendrils, shaping itself into a figure that the real Naruto wished it to be. When it stopped, the new creature was revealed to be a dragon like its lightning counterpart. The only differences were that it had a crown horns were sticking out from the back of its head in a half-sun fashion. Its wings looked heavier and had 3 thumbs. Its mask looked similar to its counterpart, only with the markings being green instead of light blue. The two beings stared at each other for a moment before nodding. They flapped their wings and took off, heading deeper into the city. South Gate. At this part, I just can't help but hear the music from the steps of Faith playing. Quickly! Charge into the village! A commanding Oto Nin ordered as his subordinates marched forward alongside Suna Shinobi. They charged through the destroyed gates as the 3-headed snake crushed everything in its path. Damn it! Ibiki cursed as he watched the destruction from a nearby command post. Do you require aid in this position? Ibiki turned around to see an Amalja wearing a mask and carrying an important-looking staff. Who are you? Ibiki demanded. I am Kamichika, chieftain in charge of the Amalja forces who are defending your village. I am to coordinate the forces of my people while Lord Ifrit handles the Ichibi, the beast man explained. Just then, an enormous pillar of fire erupted from the arena. Or to be more precise, handled. You mean that the Uzumaki kid already took down the Ichibi, a Jonin shouted. With the assistance of Lord Ifrit of course, Kamichika reminded him. Now all that remains is to dispose of these invaders. Do you wish to have prisoners? Yes, we'd like to capture a good number of shinobi from each village, Ibiki said. But right now we need to focus on taking care of that snake. Commander Ibiki. Look! A Jonin shouted as he pointed towards a taller building. A familiar figure with white hair could be seen in a ridiculous pose. Is that Jiraiya-sama? Ibiki shouted incredulously. The toad Sonin leapt into the air above the snake and weaved several hand seals. Kuchios no Jutsu, food cart destroyer. In a large poof of smoke, a large purple toad with a shield and Susumida came crashing down on top of the snake. Nice job, Ken. Jiraiya said to the toad. Thank you, but I believe I was too clumsy, the toad said as he vanished, leaving behind the corpse of the snake. I believe that takes care of your snake problem, the beast man said to Ibiki, who just shook his head and muttered something under his breath. Commander Ibiki. I have news you would want to hear, a Chunin said as he appeared next to the famous interrogator. What is it? He asked. We detained the two Oto Genin who were in the matches today. Both of them surrendered willingly, and when questioned why they claimed that they discovered that they were going to be used as sacrifices, he explained. Knowing that snake, I wouldn't put it past him, Ibiki muttered. Keep a close eye on them, I don't want to take any chances. Yes sir, the Chunin exclaimed as he vanished in a shunshin. Kamijiga then turned to the scarred interrogator and asked, is there anywhere you need my people to be? Are they good at making a charge? Ibiki asked. They will charge the enemy without fear, the chieftain proudly told him. Ibiki nodded and brought the beastman over to a map of the village. We need your people to push a large amount of the enemy into this ambush point. Once there, we can take them out easily. Kamijiga nodded and held his staff in both hands as he chanted some strange words. 3 orbs that were glowing a bright red began to circle him before they vanished, and a small sphere of fire appeared before him. The sphere vanished, and in its place was a small version of Ifrit who was floating above the ground and was missing its lower body. Go and deliver the message to the rest of the warriors, make sure that they understand what the plan is, Kamijiga told the small Ifrit, who nodded and floated away towards where the other Amaljae were. What was that thing? Ibiki asked. An Iji, a being that holds a small portion of the power of a primal. This was granted to me by Lord Ifrit. I use him as either a messenger or fighter. Suddenly, a tornado infused with lightning shot down from the sky and blew away a number of enemy shinobi. Everyone looked to the sky and saw Naruto's twin dragons shooting towards the battlefield. Ibiki couldn't help but laugh. I had a feeling that kid would try to finish getting the 5 elements for his little collection. Indeed, young Naruto has been taught to capitalize on an opportunity if it is presented to him, Kamijiga said. Both leaders watched as a large group of Amaljae warriors charged from one side of the city. The invaders were slowly being overwhelmed by the might of the Amaljae, Konoha, and Kyumo forces, and were slowly being pushed into a large area full of destroyed buildings, all while the twin dragons sent lightning-charged tornadoes at them along the way. Anbu forces then appeared along the rooftops, surrounding the invaders, along with the Brotherhood of Ash, all of them bearing bows and arrows. Yalajga, Hinata, and Shino appeared behind the blue-clad Amaljae. What's going on? Hinata asked. I suggest you two look away, Yalajga told them. A trap is about to be sprung upon the invaders. And I do not think that you might be able to stomach the intensity of this event. The 2 members of Team 8 nodded and turned away. Hinata took extra precautions and covered her ears. Shino decided to follow her example. What the hell is this? Oto Shinobi growled. Our counterattack, Ibiki said as he looked down on the invaders as he raised his right hand, Kamijiga doing the same. Normally we would take you all in and interrogate you, Ibiki began. But I'm not in the mood right now, so you're all going to die. With that, the 2 leaders brought their hands down and their forces unleashed a storm of kunai, shuriken, and arrows upon the invaders. Their screams of agony echoing through the empty streets, until it was all over. Ibiki turned towards the Anbu behind him and ordered, search for any survivors and bring them in. Me and Enko are going to have some fun later. The Anbu operative silently nodded and went to inform the rest of his team. Are our services required elsewhere? Kamijiga asked. I'd like you guys to stick around for a little while longer, Ibiki said. We have no idea if another village will try to take advantage of the situation. You are allies of our Lord Summoner, it would disgrace us to leave you in your hour of need, Kamijiga proclaimed as he went to the other Amaljae that were waiting for his command. Commander, the barrier that Hokage-sama was trapped in has fallen, a Jonin informed him. Well, send in a team over there and find out what the hell happened. Ibiki practically screamed into his ear. Yes, sir. The Jonin shakily replied before he gathered a team and began to head towards the arena. Over by Hinata and Shino, the 2 were looking over Naruto's recent additions to his collection. These 2 look to be very powerful, Shino noted. Especially due to the fact that they can attack from the air. Indeed, But I think that each one of Naruto's hearts has their own strengths, Hinata told him. It's all about the situation. You are correct in that statement, Shino agreed. Shall we go and check up on Naruto, and to make sure that he is going to be able to take you out on a date? Shino. Hinata squeaked as she pulled her face into her jacket while the young Aburame smirked in amusement. The two Jiongu creations just looked at them before shrugging in confusion. Chunin Exam Stadium. Ifrit let out a low growl as he glared heated daggers at the bijou before him. The Lord of the Inferno's body was emitting large levels of heat, but none of it seemed to be affecting Naruto in any way as he stood of the primal's back. I wonder if you'll push him to the point where he'll be desperate enough to use the Bijudama? Kurama wondered. I hope not, Naruto thought. Take this, you oversized lizard. Shikaka laughed as he sent a wave of sand at the primal. Ifrit crouched down and leapt into the air as the sand passed underneath him. He landed on the ground and reared back as the fiery aura around him grew larger. Crimson Cyclone. Ifrit roared as he launched himself forward and tore a hole through Shikaka's torso. Naruto was holding on for dear life on one of Ifrit's spines. Once the primal landed on the ground, Naruto faced Shikaku and began to weave hand seals. Jiongu Koshiryu no Jutsu. Naruto launched a thread dragon at Shikaku and had the construct clamp down on his arm. The young Jinchuriki then raced up the makeshift bridge in an attempt to get to Gaara, who was asleep on Shikaku's forehead. The large bijou noticed this and shook his arm, dislodging the dragon and sending Naruto plummeting to the ground. Where do you think you're going, little insect? I surely do not think that you're trying to wake up my little puppet here. Because that would make me really angry. A smart idea, though it was poorly executed, Ifrit told Naruto as he caught him. The only way we can wake up the host is by destroying Shikaku's physical body long enough for the boy to be unprotected. And how are we going to do that? Naruto asked. While we fight, I will be putting aside energy for me to use my ultimate attack. Due to my element being over fire itself, it will destroy his body of sand, Ifrit explained as he slammed his claw on the ground and raised a pillar of fire at Shikaku's feet, turning them into glass and letting out a fireball from his maw that impacted against the bijou's chest, sending him reeling back. In the stands, Kushina was nothing but a red blur of death. She sped through the Oto and Suna shinobi, cutting them down with her sword in a beautiful, yet deadly fashion. She stopped for a moment and looked over at the arena, seeing Ifrit turning Shikaku's feet to glass and launching the fireball before she turned back and raised her sword to block a blow from an incoming enemy, who she quickly decapitated. 31. Zabuza shouted as he cleaved an enemy in half with his giant sword. Impressive, Zabuza-san. Guy praised, but I am at 32, he shouted as he kicked a shinobi through the wall. You're getting slow, Guy, Kakashi drawled as he threw a kunai into a Suna shinobi's throat. I'm at 34 already. Asuma chuckled at the trio's antics as he turned to Kurenai. Those three are cleaning house. At this rate, there won't be enough for our little contest. Perhaps you should pick up the pace then, Kurenai told him as she casually walked up to a shinobi she trapped in a genjutsu and slit her throat. I'm ahead of you by 2 now. At this rate, you'll have to pay for dinner. Asuma clicked his teeth in frustration and looked around for more shinobi. On the other side of the arena, Fu was busy dealing with her own opponents. Normally, she wouldn't be able to handle multiple opponents, but her scale powder was able to help her even the odds somewhat. Come out, little girl, we won't hurt you much, a vicious Oto shinobi chuckled darkly. Fu narrowed her eyes and flung a kunai at the offending shinobi, catching him in the shoulder. Ag! You bitch! You're gonna pay for this, the shinobi yelled as he ripped the kunai out of his shoulder and began to stalk through the powder for Fu. Don't mess her up too bad, then we can't have any fun later, his partner called out with a crazed chuckle. Fu couldn't help but shudder at the implications. Don't worry, Fu-chan. I'll protect you from these bad people. Chome shouted. I'll ram my horns so far up their butts they'll never be able to sit down again. The young Jinchuriki, giggled internally and thanked the insect-like bijou before she turned her attention back to her opponents and pulled out 2 kunai. She exited to the edge of the scale powder and smashed them against each other, creating the spark that sealed their fate. The powder erupted into an explosion that killed the Oto shinobi that were still inside. Fu grinned in triumph and quickly moved away to find some more enemies. Arena. Please tell me that making him angry isn't part of your plan. Naruto shouted as Ifrit jumped away from another wave of sand as he let out a stream of fire at Shikaku. His anger will make him reckless, allowing him to create mistakes that I shall capitalize upon, Ifrit explained as he turned Shikaku's claw into glass, before shattering it with his horns. Naruto weaved some hand seals and Fox popped its head out and opened its mouth. Katon, Zukoku. A small fireball shot out and turned into a large wave of fire that managed to turn Shikaku's legs to glass again. Stop doing that. Shikaku roared as he created a large wave of sand that rushed towards the two. Ifrit slammed his claw onto the ground and several circles of fire appeared in front of them. Radiant plume. Ifrit roared as the circles erupted into large pillars of fire that protected them from the sand. Infernal howl, he then shot out a fireball that slammed into Shikaku's face, causing the bijou to reel back from the attack as his face reformed. We need to end this quickly before he decides to use the Bijudama. Naruto yelled as Ifrit jumped away from another one of Shikaku's attacks. I have nearly gained enough energy, we need only several minutes, Ifrit told him as he let loose another stream of fire. I hope that we can last that long, Naruto hoped as he fired off several streams of his own fire from Fox's mask. The flames caused small parts of Shikaku's body to harden and fall off before being replaced. Stance. Hayashi Hyuga had fought through the Third Great Ninja War. He had seen many horrors that would send any lesser men insane. So taking care of any invaders who came near him while watching Kushina decimate them was nothing to him. He slammed his palm into an enemy's chest and instantly stopped her heart, causing her to crumple to the ground in a lifeless heap. He quickly turned back and saw that his nephew was looking around, shock and horror etched into his features. He had expected this, as none of the new generation had experienced something akin to war. The only exception to that would be Naruto from when he had taken his first heart. At least Hitomi would be able to protect the girls and him if he didn't snap out of it. With that thought in mind, he turned around and leapt back into the fight. Wee! Hayashi looked up in shock as Killer Bee dropped down from above and began to take out Oto and Suna Shinobi with his unique sword style. Don't fear me, I'm the rapping Killer Bee. I'm here to stay, so how about we play? We. Hayashi just blinked and shook his head as he continued to fight against the invaders. He noticed a Suna Shinobi going to stab him with his sword, and turned to intercept. But before he could fully turn, 2 of Killer Bee's swords impaled the ninja and killed him on the spot. Hey old man Hyuga! My bro wants me to help ya. Killer Bee rapped as he collected his swords and jumped onto an enemy ninja. Come on, I'm your bud, so don't be a stick in the mud. I'm going to need a drink after this, Hayashi muttered. You'll do no such thing. Hitomi yelled. The Hyuga patriarch grumbled under his breath before jumping back into the fray. Kushina blurred through 3 shinobi before flicking her sword to her side, causing them to fall apart into tiny pieces of flesh and bone. She then shot 3 of her chakra chains towards a small group of shinobi, piercing them like a shish kebab before she threw the bodies away, not caring where they landed at the time. These people will pay for interrupting my Sochi's match. Kushina raged as she sliced through many more shinobi. Arena. Burn! Ifrit roared as he incinerated Shikaku's arm once again. The Ichibi swung his other arm at the Lord of the Inferno, knocking him back onto the ground. Naruto was holding onto one of Ifrit's horns for dear life, as the primal decided to be more mobile in his fight with the bijou. Ifrit growled and sent out 3 pulses of Vulcan bursts that sent Shikaku back before he released a wave of blue fire from his maw, creating a ring of fire around the Ichibi. The primal size burned a bright red before he roared, "My flames shall consume thy body and soul both." He then let loose a stream of white-hot fire that caused Shikaku to cry out in pain. The bijou pulled in a large amount of air before he released it in another Rankuden. Doton, Doriahiki! Naruto cried as he created a large stone wall to defend him and Ifrit from the attack. The wall still crumbled from the bijou's attack, but was able to defend the duo. Your control over the element of earth has improved, Ifrit noted. Well, when your teacher says that you either learn or get thrown off the platform, you tend to pay attention, Naruto chuckled nervously. Time to die. Shikaku screamed as he lunged forward to take a bite out of the primal and Jinchuriki. The Lord of the Inferno grabbed Naruto and leapt back to avoid Shikaku's massive jaws as they clamped down on where they were. How much longer? Naruto shouted as he dodged an incoming San spear. None. Prepare yourself. Ifrit warned him. Naruto nodded and jumped off of the primal's back as a ring of flames orbited the Lord of the Inferno. Succumb to the Inferno. Ifrit roared as he slammed his claws on the ground, causing 10 orange lights to come from the floor. Shikaku looked on in fear as 10 orange constructs in the shape of nails emerged from the ground. Stance. Ka-chan. Hanabi screamed as she watched her mother fight off a Suna shinobi. Turn away, Hanabi. Hitomi shouted as she pushed him away before slamming her palm against his chest, causing him to crumple to the ground in a lifeless heap. Niji was having his own problems with his opponent, as he wasn't as skilled as Hitomi or Hayashi. He was just barely managing to hold off his opponent, who was highly skilled in taijutsu. Is this the ultimate taijutsu of the Hyuga clan? He mocked. You're out of your league, kid. Give up and I may give you a swift end. Niji grunted as he tried to push the shinobi back so he could try and attack, but he wasn't getting anywhere. Incoming. Both of them looked up and the shinobi received a pair of shoes to his face, causing him to stumble back and allowing Niji to shut down his arms and legs before knocking him unconscious. Niji looked up and saw that it was Fu who had assisted him. No need to thank me. Just doing me duty as your friendly neighborhood bug gal. Fu shouted before she flew off. Niji could only blink in bewilderment as he tried to comprehend what happened. 1. She was a bit funny, wasn't she? Natsumi giggled to her friend. Yeah. Hanabi agreed. Hitomi couldn't help but smile, seeing that the children weren't traumatized by the events happening around them. Hey! That big lizard guy is staring to glow. Hanabi shouted. Hitomi turned around and saw what her daughter was talking about as her eyes widened. Hayashi! Hitomi shouted, getting her husband's attention. The Hyuga patriarch turned to his wife and saw what she was pointing to, and his eyes widened in shock. Take cover! Hayashi shouted as he grabbed Niji and hid behind a pillar, while Hitomi grabbed the girls and followed his lead. All of the Konoha and Kyumo shinobi heard his warning and followed his lead, while the invaders weren't so lucky. The next thing they knew, the world erupted into fire. Arena. Naruto looked on in awe as Ifrit was surrounded by floating nails. Each of them was emitting enough heat to make them give off a large amount of steam that created a small cloud above them. Ifrit reared back his claws and threw them forward, sending the nail at Shikaku. No! Stay away! Shikaku cried out in terror as he tried to bat away the nails. They weaved through his strikes and impaled themselves into him. 2 on each arm, 2 on each leg. 1 in his chest, and 1 in his tail. Shikaku struggled madly to get them out as he was pinned to the ground, the nails seemingly taking away his mobility. Greya! Rag! Ifrit roared into the sky as flames danced around his body. He leapt up into the air and landed on Shikaku's chest, the heat emanating from him causing the sand to harden quickly. Thy soul shall burn for eternity. Ifrit growled as he leapt up and began to charge up energy. Naruto quickly surrounded himself with a dome of earth in preparation of what was to come. Hellfire! Ifrit roared as several spheres of fire appeared around him. These spheres exploded upwards as an enormous pillar of fire engulfed Shikaku and most of the arena, bathing the entire area in Ifrit's flames. When the flames died out, the entire floor of the arena was devoid of all plant life and charred by the flames. Naruto's dome fell away as he looked around in shock at the power of the attack, and when he looked at Shikaku, his jaw dropped. The bijou was turned into glass, no part of Sand remained in view except for a small sphere in the bijou's forehead. Ifrit raised his claw and slammed it down on the glass bijou, which broke instantly. The sphere of Sand fell to the floor and fell apart to reveal a sleeping Gaara. Ifrit grabbed the Jinchuriki and began to heat up his claw until Gaara woke up screaming. "What have you done? Mother is in pain!" Gaara yelled. Ifrit merely tossed him to the ground where he fell down in exhaustion. The primal then backed away as Naruto stepped forward. "Stay away!" Gaara screamed as he quickly backed away. "It hurts, doesn't it?" Naruto asked. "The pain of loneliness, having everyone ignore your existence and wish you would disappear." At this point, Gaara had stopped and listened to his fellow Jinchuriki. "The only difference between you and me is that I let people into my life while you push them away. Because I love my precious people and want to keep them safe, I can fight anyone and win." A blast of wind caused the Uzumaki to jump back, as Temari and Kankuro dropped down and stood in front of Gaara. "Get back!" Kankuro shouted as he brought out his puppet. Temari unfurled her fan and prepared to attack. "Temari, Kankuro," Gaara began. His siblings looked back at him as he had his head down. "No more, I've had enough." "Gaara!" Temari whispered as she looked to her youngest brother. "Can you forgive me?" Gaara asked. Temari just dropped her fan as she pulled her brother into a hug. Kankuro just smiled and returned his puppet back into place. "Come on, let's get out of here," he said as he picked up Temari's fan. The San siblings then quickly left the arena. "Are you sure it was wise to let them go?" Kurama asked. "There's no need to go after them, they're done fighting," Naruto told him. "A wise choice, young one, I can tell that they have no more desire to be a part of this invasion," Ifrit told his summoner. "Now come. I can sense a foul energy coming from high above us." "GG." Naruto gasped as he remembered that the Hokage was fighting above them. He quickly climbed onto Ifrit's back, but faltered as he felt a moment of weakness come over him. "You have expanded much chakra in this fight, not to mention you have not had much time to rest from your previous fights," Kurama told him. "If the need arises, we may have to use that in order to assist your leader," Ifrit said. "But I thought that you and the others said that I should be older before attempting to try that out," Naruto argued. "Fear not, for I shall be the one in control, not you. You will not run the risk of losing yourself if we attempt it this way," Ifrit said to him. Naruto nodded and grabbed hold of Ifrit's spines as the Lord of the Inferno leapt up quickly. "Hang on, GG. We're coming." Kage Booth. Hiruzen Sarutobi grit his teeth in rage as his fallen student performed the unspeakable act of using the Edo Tensei to bring back his two predecessors. Saru? Is that you?" Hashirama Senju, the Shodaime Hokage, asked as he squinted his eyes, trying to recognize his aged student. "Yes, it's me, Hashirama Sensei," Hiruzen answered as he tried to keep himself under control. "So we've been brought back with the Edo Tensei," Tobarama Senju, Nidaime Hokage, noted. "And I assume that it was you who performed the summoning?" he asked as he looked back at Orochimaru. "Of course," he replied, "after all, bringing you back will make killing Sensei so much easier and perhaps Tsunade as well." Hashirama perked up at the mention of his granddaughter. "Tsunade?" He then looked around before his eyes landed on the female Sannin. "Tsunade-chan? Is that you?" Tsunade took a shaky breath before answering, "Hi, Gigi. It's been a long time since you died." Hashirama smiled fondly and said, "Indeed, you've grown into a beautiful woman, Tsunade-chan. And I can see that the village has grown as well." "Saru, why are you Hokage at that age? You should have made a successor years ago," Tobarama admonished his student. "My successor had died 13 years ago when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha," Hiruzen told him. The deceased Hokage raised an eyebrow and asked, why was it not properly contained? Was its Jinchuriki weak? Hiruzen gave off a nervous chuckle and said, to say that she was weak would be saying that you were horrible with Suiton. The seal broke during childbirth and the Yondaime died, sealing the Kyuubi away once again. Who's the blonde man over there? Tobirama asked. Yondaime Raikage, the Raikage answered. I hate to break up this little reunion, but we really must get this moving along. I do have a village to destroy, Orochimaru said as he produced 2 kunai with tags attached to them. Hiruzen's eyes widened upon seeing the tags and quickly shouted, get the tags. A quickly activated his Raiton no Yoroi and flashed towards Orochimaru. He managed to knock the kunai away from Tobirama's head, but the Sannin managed to slip the kunai into Hashirama. The Shodaime's eyes lost all emotion and the cracks on his skin and armor disappeared. His skin gained a healthy tone to it. Orochimaru didn't even look disappointed and said, I may not have both of them under my control, but having the Shinobi no Kami under my direct control will make this far more easier. You may have one of them under your complete control, but that won't assure you victory today. Hiruzen shouted as he weaved hand seals. Katan, Hozenka no Jutsu. The aged Hokage breathed out a swarm of fireballs at the 3 opponents. Hashirama scowled as his body moved on its own, having no control over anything other than his thoughts and voice. Tsunade, take care of your grandfather, Raikage Dano, please deal with Nadame-sama. I shall deal with my fallen student myself. Hiruzen told them as he jumped towards the snake Sannin. Orochimaru licked his lips in anticipation and met his former sensei, exchanging a kick that both of them blocked. Hiruzen aimed a punch at Orochimaru, but he was blocked as the Sannin put his arms in an X-guard. Why sensei? Your strikes aren't as hard as they used to be, Orochimaru taunted. Have you gotten too busy to train? You wish. Hiruzen yelled as he dropped down and swept his feet out to trip Orochimaru. The Rouge Sannin merely leapt over the outstretched legs, but Hiruzen was counting on this. He twisted his body around till he was on his hands before pushing himself up, slamming his feet into the still airborne Nuke-Nin, sending him flying back. Hiruzen then flipped to his feet and began to weave more hand seals. Doton, Doryuden no Jutsu. A earthen dragon burst through the roof before firing off a barrage of mud balls at Orochimaru. Using his snake-like physique, he managed to slip through the balls while in midair before landing on the ground. Senaijishu. Orochimaru hissed as a large group of snakes flew out of his sleeves and towards the Sandaime. The aged Hokage weaved several more hand seals and created a blade of wind that he used to slice the snakes to ribbons. He then dashed forward with surprising speed and managed to deliver a 1-2 combo to the fallen Sannin, breaking his ribs if the sound of cracking bones was anything to go by. He finished with a palm strike that sent Orochimaru into a wooden wall. The snake Sannin then opened his mouth wide, and proceeded to vomit another Orochimaru out, this one without any wounds on his body. Narrowing his eyes, Hiruzen bit his thumb and weaved hand seals before slamming his hand on the ground. In a puff of smoke, a large, white-furred monkey dressed armor appeared. He looked around before narrowing his eyes at Orochimaru. So you're finally going to kill him? The monkey asked Hiruzen in a hard tone. Indeed, Enma-san, it's time I fixed my mistake, Hiruzen told him. Enma nodded and clapped his hands together. Henge, Kongonyoi. Enma cried as he vanished in a cloud of smoke and became a large staff that the Hokage grabbed before taking a stance. Orochimaru frowned slightly before opening his mouth, allowing a snake to emerge. The snake opened its mouth and regurgitated a sword. The Kusanagi no Tsurugi, Enma said. Even that blade will still be able to harm me in this form, be careful Hiruzen. Hiruzen nodded before he and Orochimaru leapt at each other. You must fight harder if you wish to defeat me. Tobirama shouted to A as he sent a barrage of water bullets at the Raikage. He batted them away with his lightning-covered arm before he appeared next to the revived Senju and delivered a heavy chop that managed to cut off his arm. You need to use a powerful jutsu that will obliterate my body completely, or at least restrain me until an accomplished Fuinjutsu user can seal me away. Tobarama told him. A scowled. Lightning straight, he shouted as he flashed forward and burst through the deceased Hokage, nearly obliterating him. Watch out! My body has become explosion tags. Tobarama shouted. Managed to get away as the resulting explosion destroyed that part of the roof. The Raikage looked back and saw that his opponent was reforming once more. If B was here, then we could take out this puppet with ease. A growled. Their AB combo would have been able to take out Tobarama, but if it didn't, then B would use his ink to seal him up. Alas, his brother was not here, so he had to deal with the revived Kage himself. Suiton, Suryuden no Jutsu. Tobarama created a water dragon out of thin air and sent it after A. The Yandame Raikage quickly moved out of the way as the dragon crashed into the roof. He looked up and saw more dragons rushing towards him, causing him to quickly move if he wanted to avoid being crushed. Tobarama then weaved more hand seals and sent out a large vortex of water that managed to hit the Raikage, sending him tumbling across the roof. Lariat! Roared as he cloaked himself in lightning and rushed the Naruto, slamming his arm into his chest and causing it to burst apart. He looked back and saw that Tobarama was regenerating at a slower pace, but still regenerating nonetheless. Move! Tobarama shouted as he weaved hand seals and fired off a barrage of water bullets. Dodged all of the attacks before he fired off a large lightning bolt that the Naruto dodged. But reappeared behind him and delivered a cross-chop to the back of Tobarama's head, obliterating it with the power he put into it. However, the deceased Hokage merely reformed several seconds later. This is gonna take a while, he grumbled as he leapt at Tobarama once more. Tsunade grunted as she dodged the strikes sent at her by her grandfather. Hashirama's face held no expression as he mercilessly attacked his own flesh and blood. Tsunade may have monstrous strength, but it was nothing compared to Hashirama's own power. Thankfully, Orochimaru was forced to seal away most of his strength in order to control him. Hashirama quickly formed hand seals and sent a barrage of wooden spears at Tsunade. The slug Sonin used her immense strength to shatter the wooden attack before ducking under her grandfather's punch. She grabbed his arm and heaved him over her shoulder, planting him head first into the roof. Tsunade then jumped away as a ring of spiked branches erupted from the ground in an attempt to impale her. She watched Hashirama emerge from the ground and clasp his hands together. The roof began to shake as several large roots emerged from underneath it, all of them heading towards Tsunade. Her eyes widened and she quickly moved out of the way as they crashed down where she was. Tsunade quickly pulled out a kunai with an explosion tag attached to it and flung it at Hashirama. The Shodaime created a wooden wall to block it, causing the explosion to create a large cloud of dust. Hashirama looked around trying to find his granddaughter. Apparently Orochimaru had also sealed away his sensory abilities as well. Tsutenkyaku. Tsunade dropped from the sky and delivered an axe kick to Hashirama's head, crushing him and the entire area beneath them. She jumped away and saw that the Hokage was slowly reforming. How did that not take care of you? She muttered as she prepared to attack once again. Hashirama said nothing, but if he were able to he would praise Tsunade for her immense strength. Instead, the deceased Hokage weaved more hand seals and slammed his hands on the ground. Spiked roots erupted from all sides around Tsunade and attempted to impale her. The female Sonin pushed chakra into her legs and leapt up as the roots skewered the ground she was standing on. Oof! Tsunade let out a grunt as something collided with her in midair. She looked back and saw that her former sensei was thrown into her when Orochimaru summoned a snake to knock Hiruzen into the air. Feel like switching? Tsunade suggested. Hiruzen looked at her and nodded. He positioned himself facing Hashirama while Tsunade aimed herself at Orochimaru. She placed her feet upon Enma and used her strength to propel both of them towards their new opponents. Hashirama received a staff through the chest before he threw him to the ground. Orochimaru scrambled away as Tsunade destroyed the ground beneath him. She darted forward and drove her fist into the Rouge Sonin's chest, breaking all of the bones in his chest and sending him tumbling away. Orochimaru once again vomited himself up, shedding his skin like the snake he was. He had a disappointed face and said, "Now why would you do that, Tsunade? Sensei and I were reconnecting." "Well, how about I reconnect my fist with your face?" Tsunade shouted as she exploded forward, intending to rearrange Orochimaru's face permanently. A was brimming with rage. None of his attacks were able to take down the revived Naruto, no matter how much power he put into them. The only positive part was that he was quick enough to avoid all of his attacks. Suiton, Daibakufu no Jutsu. Tobirama created a large vortex of water and sent it towards the Raikage. He flashed away once again as the attack tore apart a good chunk of the roof. He appeared before Tobirama and grabbed him by the face. Iron Claw! A roared as he slammed the Hokage into the ground. He then lifted up his leg and slammed his supercharged foot into Tobirama's chest, driving him deeper into the tile. A jumped away and began to breath harder. His fight was beginning to take a toll on him. Fighting an opponent that was revived by the Edo Tensei was very taxing, especially due to the fact that they would just get back up again. Once again, Tobirama was getting up and reforming, causing it to let loose a string of curses that made the red-haired Odo ninja powering the barrier blush. "Raikage Dano!" Hiruzen shouted as he fought off Hashirama. "Try throwing him into the barrier. That should eliminate him and free his soul." A nodded and raced behind Tobirama and heaved him into the air before jumping after him. He gripped the deceased Hokage's legs and began to fall down like a meteor. Liger Bomb! A crash down into the ground and slammed Tobirama underneath him before discharging a large surge of electricity. Suddenly, Tobirama exploded and sent a flying back. The Naruto had once again changed his body into explosive tags and detonated, this time at point-blank range. He reformed once more and began to weave more hand seals. Suiton, Suryuden no Jutsu. More water dragons rose from the air and made a beeline towards the downed Raikage. A's eyes snapped open and rolled out of the way and managed to dodge most of them, but two impacted against his chest and threw him back some more, sending him tumbling until his back hit a stone wall that Hiruzen had raised to defend against Hashirama. A got up with a groan and looked to see Tobirama rushing towards him with water coiled around his arms like drills. He rolled out of the way as the drills pierced through the stone where his head had been. A delivered a hard punch that sent the Naruto flying and leapt after him. Hiruzen was hard-pressed against Hashirama. The Shodaime was powerful, even with most of his power sealed away to keep him under Orochimaru's control. His Mokuton was still a deadly weapon, while his enhanced strength was as destructive as always. The Sandaime jabbed his staff into Hashirama's gut, but the Shodaime grabbed it and swung both the transformed summon and Hokage around before tossing them away. Hiruzen used Enma to land safely before he flung Shuriken at the deceased Hokage and flashing through some hand seals. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, the small group of Shuriken instantly became hundreds. Hashirama flashed through his own hand seals and summoned a dome of wood that defended him from being shredded apart. Several roots suddenly shot out of the ground in an attempt to impale Hiruzen, but he managed to jump out of the way in time. He then used his staff to smash apart the roots when they came at him again. The Sandaime flashed through more hand seals and released a stream of fire that burned the ground between the two opponents as they raced towards Hashirama. The flames vanished after a while and Hiruzen looked around for the Shodaime. Feeling his sixth sense tingle, Hiruzen jumped away as Hashirama exploded from the ground beneath him. The chakra covering his fist showing that he had enough power in that to blow Hiruzen's head clean off. A root followed Hashirama, who used it to jump after his opponent, intent on making his fist connect with Hiruzen. "You should avoid that," Enma shouted to his summoner. "I know," Hiruzen yelled back as he dodged the attack. Seeing an opening, Hiruzen jabbed his staff into Hashirama's back, sending him flying towards the barrier. Unfortunately, a wall of roots managed to catch the deceased Shodaime before he could make contact. Hiruzen cursed in frustration as he prepared to attack once more. Suddenly, the barrier began to flicker, causing all 6 combatants to cease movements. The Edo Tensei merely ceased as their auto-battling skills caused them to stop due to this unknown event, in preparation of anything to come. Outside the barrier, the Anbu that had gathered there looked on with a mixture of worry and frustration. Worry for their Hokage and loyal Sannin, and frustration for not being able to assist them in battling the snake Sannin and his puppets. They heard a large eruption behind them, and looked back to see a massive pillar of fire coming from the arena. "Should we investigate?" one of the Anbu asked his commander. "No, Uzumaki has handled the Ichibi," she replied. "And our duty is to be here when the barrier falls so we can assist Hokage-sama." They heard a loud crash behind them and saw Naruto and Ifrit on the roof. The Lord of the Inferno approached the barrier and inspected it closely. "A barrier of fire, how simple," he scoffed. "How can he just dismiss that thing like it's nothing? Not even we can break it open," an Anbu shouted. Ifrit turned to him and said, "All flames are mine to command, not even these can resist my will." Okay, enough with the boasting," Naruto said to him as he approached the primal. "So what are we gonna do?" "Stand before me," Ifrit ordered. Naruto complied and stood before him, his back towards the primal. "Clear thy mind, focus on my voice," Ifrit said. Naruto closed his eyes and did so. "Feel mine flames as they wash over thee, accept them as they enter thy soul. I shall guide thee, and prevent thou from succumbing to the inferno. Receive my flames, and be reborn." Ifrit's eyes then widened and he released a roar as he crumbled to the ground. His form burst into red spheres of light before it entered Naruto's body. Naruto's eyes snapped open and he hunched over, a bright light emanating from his body, blinding the Anbu. His hearts quickly jumped out of him and raced to the side. When they looked again, the Anbu's eyes widened in shock. Naruto was hunched over, his body seeming more lean and tougher. There were small patches of red scales on various parts of his body, each emitting a small amount of heat. There were horns growing from the sides of his head, not unlike the ones Ifrit possessed. His hands had turned into claws, and large spikes growing out of his elbows. From his back, ripping through his clothes, were 4 large spines, in the same arrangement of the primals. His eyes had turned into a burning orange, and his hair had taken on a reddish hue. "Mindscape! Get off me!" Kurama roared as his face was planted into the water underneath him. On his head was both Naruto and Ifrit. As soon as the Lord of the Inferno appeared, he had jumped up and landed on the Biju's head, causing his head to fall to the floor at the sudden weight. "You should sit on Shikaku." "Not me!" Kurama roared. "Would you rather my brother sat here instead?" Ifrit asked, already knowing the answer. "Never mind," Kurama grumbled, not in the mood for a mountain to fall onto his back, again. Naruto snickered. "You're scared? What happened to being the strongest Biju who knew no fear?" Kurama gave him a deadpan look and said, "Okay, you can get sat on by that walking mountain. Afterwards, you can tell me how it feels." Naruto gulped at the thought and immediately turned around, not wanting to imagine himself becoming a pancake. Kurama gained a victorious smirk on his face as he let out a devilish chuckle. "Allow me to take control," Ifrit told him. "I shall regulate my energy and take down the enemies beyond the barrier." "Okay," Naruto agreed as he backed up a bit, allowing the primal to take control of his body. Outside, Naruto's eyes snapped open and he released a primal roar that sent shivers down the Sound 4's spines. "What the fuck is this guy?" the redhead yelled. Naruto stabbed his claws into the barrier, not getting incinerated to the surprise of everyone. He then proceeded to rip it open and step inside. The destabilizing of a part of the barrier caused it to waver. The Sound 4 pumped a large amount of chakra to keep it together. Naruto then raced forward through the small forest created by Hashirama's attacks, before he emerged on top of a stone wall. "Naruto! What are you doing here?" Hiruzen screamed, close to having a heart attack at seeing his surrogate grandson inside the war zone. "Fear not, mortal," Ifrit's voice said from the reddish-blonde's mouth. "My summoner is unharmed. He merely desired to save you," so I gave him this opportunity. However, I have taken control to make sure that he does not lose himself to this power. My, you're such an interesting child, Naruto-kun, Orochimaru purred as he licked his lips. You'll be such a joy to experiment on once I take you from here. Ifrit released a growl from Naruto's mouth and snarled, "You disgust me, pathetic mortal. You reek of such taint, it is surprising that you are not a paragon. Such an existence must be purged from this world with extreme prejudice." Kukuku, Orochimaru chuckled. "Kill me? I'm afraid that's not possible, now please stand there like a good boy while my puppets capture you." He then snapped his fingers and Tobirama broke away from A and darted towards Naruto. The Raikage stumbled and raced after the Nadeime, but was just too slow this time. Ifrit raised Naruto's arm and backhanded the space to his right. Tobirama appeared just in time to receive a hit that sent him flying, leaving everyone, sans Hashirama, with their jaws dropped. Speaking of the Shodaime, he sent out several routes to capture the Jinchuriki. Ifrit let loose a wave of fire that burned the wood and continued towards Hashirama. The Shodaime managed to escape mostly unscathed, while in possession of several burns that were slowly being removed. "Is that all?" Ifrit asked in an uncaring tone, trying to rile up the fallen Sannin enough to force him to make a mistake he could capitalize on. True to his predictions, the Sannin growled in frustration and gripped the handle on his sword tightly. Hiruzen saw he was distracted, and slammed his staff into Orochimaru's chest, sending him flying and breaking his ribs, if the snapping sound was anything to go by. Orochimaru landed in a heap before he vomited himself up once more. "And I thought that I had seen everything," Ifrit sighed. He then leapt up and slammed down onto the floor. Underneath the two deceased Hokage, pillars of fire erupted and almost burnt them to ashes. They managed to prevent themselves from being completely obliterated. Tsunade slammed her fist into the ground, causing a large boulder to shoot up underneath her grandfather, sending him flying into the air. Ifrit then leapt up and slammed a flaming fist into Hashirama's gut, sending him into the ground. Sundi then grabbed him by his legs and spun him around before sending him flying into the barrier. Unfortunately, a root caught him once more. Ifrit let out a growl of frustration before he slammed both claws into the ground, creating a ring of flaming circles that ended underneath the Shodaime once more. All of them erupted at once, burning the deceased Hokage badly. When the flames vanished, the Shodaime had lost half of his body, and the kunai that was embedded in his head on the ground turned into a puddle of melted iron. "Ah, Tsunade, you fought well today," Hashirama said with a smile on his face. "GG." Tsunade mumbled. "But now it's time I left, you should throw me into the barrier while I can't react," Hashirama told them. Tsunade slowly walked forward and grabbed her grandfather by the front of his armor before tossing him into the barrier, his body bursting into flames and vanishing, his soul returning to the pure world. To end one's own flesh and blood is not an easy feat, but know that he left this world once more in peace, Ifrit told her before he leapt away. Tsunade took a moment to compose herself before she turned around and raced back into the fray. Ifrit landed before Hiruzen and Orochimaru, both combatants engaged in a heated battle. The snake Sannin stabbed forward with his sword, intending on running his former sensei through. The aged Hokage turned to the side before he swept Orochimaru's feet out from under him and slamming his staff into his chest once more. Only this time, he kept slamming it repeatedly, trying to turn everything in his chest into paste. Orochimaru opened his mouth wide and sent out a snake that surprised Hiruzen, allowing Orochimaru to slither away to regurgitate himself once more. Except this time, as soon as he exited his former skin's mouth, he was engulfed in a pillar of fire that burned him badly. Ifrit then appeared before the Sannin and shot his clawed fist into his gut, sending him back several feet before he unleashed a torrent of flames that engulfed everything in front of him. Hiruzen had to shield his face from the extreme heat that the flames generated. When the flames dispersed, Orochimaru was badly burned, his hair was almost completely burnt off, his skin charred, and parts of him looked melted. He shed his skin again, but this time it took longer than before, a sign of his chakra getting lower. Orochimaru himself noticed this and scowled deeply as everything was falling apart. His entire army was no doubt destroyed, the Ichibi was subjugated, and his former sensei was still alive. Suddenly, A and Tsunade landed behind the group, a sign that Tobirama was already dealt with. "You defeated Tobirama-sensei?" Hiruzen asked. "Yes," A replied, "I managed to stun him long enough for Tsunade to throw him with enough force to break through the water barrier he made, and into the barrier that surrounds us." "So you managed to defeat my puppets," Orochimaru stated. "No matter, I'll merely bring them back one day and kill you then." "I think not," Hiruzen stated as he stepped forward. "Sensei, no!" Tsunade shouted. "I know what you're planning to do. Don't do it." The aged Hokage turned back to his former student and smiled. "Don't worry, Tsunade, I believe it's time for the new generation to take a step forward. I'm just going to make the road a bit easier for them." "There is no need to do so," Ifrit stated as he stepped in front of the Sandaime. "I know what you are planning to do, and it is unnecessary. The world still has need for you to pass down your knowledge. I have a more effective way of dealing with this pest." Ifrit slammed his hand on the ground and created pillars of fire that prevented Orochimaru from being able to move away. He then reared his upper body back and let out a low roar, a green light beginning to form within his jaw. He snapped his body forward and released a stream of green fire at Orochimaru. Unable to dodge, he crossed his arms in front of him to defend himself. The Sannin screamed in pain as the flames washed over him, burning away at his arms. When Ifrit stopped the stream of fire, Orochimaru dropped down and clutched his arms as they began to take on a dead-like appearance. Not enough to turn them to stone, but enough to destroy the chakra network and almost obliterate the muscles. "He shall never be able to perform another jutsu again," Ifrit stated, shocking everyone. Almost instantly, the barrier dropped and the Sound Four raced towards their fallen master. "Get me out of here, now!" Orochimaru roared, doing his best to resist the pain. The orange-haired one, and the one with a lump on his back lifted up their leader and leapt away, the Anba racing after them. The one possessing multiple arms spat out a sticky web that trapped the Anba long enough for them to escape. Hiruzen sighed and released the tension in his body, the others following suit. Ifrit began to glow before releasing a bright light, blinding everyone. When they opened their eyes again, the primal was back in its true form, with an unconscious Naruto in his claw. "He is merely exhausted," Ifrit explained as he handed Naruto to Tsunade, who began to examine him. "The day's events have taken their toll on him. It is a wonder he did not collapse after Shikaka's defeat." "Who, or rather what, are you?" Hiruzen asked. "I am Ifrit, Lord of the Inferno, and God to the Amalja," he explained. "My kind have gone by many names, but we are commonly known as the Primals. You are one of the Ancient Ones." Enma realized as he transformed back into an ape. "All of the summon clans recognize you as gods among our kind. So you're telling me that this thing is a kami?" A asked. "The most powerful primal, their leader, has the power to tear the world apart with a single breath," Enma explained. "I must now take my leave, there is much to tell my brethren. The world has changed greatly since the time of the sage," Ifrit said. "There are still many questions I have," Hiruzen told him. "Tell young Naruto that he may summon me when these questions need be answered. I shall answer what I can. For now I bid you farewell," Ifrit said before he vanished into a fiery light. Hiruzen looked around, seeing all of the damage that the village had suffered. He sighed seeing all of the dead bodies and the wounded being taken away. "There is much to do," he sighed. He then walked away, heading out to assist in the recovery, Tsunade heading towards the hospital to assist those already hard at work with healing the wounded, after she had placed Naruto in his own room for a checkup. A walked off, heading to check on his own shinobi. They may be heading off in different directions, heading off to perform different duties, but they all had the same overall goal in mind. Recovery. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.